Like in most seasons since 1999, the 2013 Cleveland Browns team was flat out bad. The team was led by head coach Rob Chudzinski, who would unsurprisingly never serve as a head coach in the NFL again. Chudzinski's experience as an offensive coordinator for the Panthers the previous 2 years helped lead the Browns to a poor 25th most efficient offense in the NFL. Combined with a mediocre 19th most efficient defense in the league, the Browns secured last place in the AFC North with a sad record of only 4 wins and 12 losses. However, hidden among this team, who was outscored by nearly 100 points over the course of the season, was a diamond in the rough, as the Browns held one of the most impressive and improbable seasons by an individual player in NFL history. And that would be the 22-year-old Josh Gordon, who led the league in receiving yards with 1,646, topping the second-place finisher Antonio Brown by 147 yards. Gordon also scored 9 touchdowns on 87 receptions, leaving his combined stats among the likes of Calvin Johnson, the wonderful and legendary Demaryius Thomas, AJ Green, and others, despite only playing 14 games. However, what is most impressive about Gordon's 2013 season is that he did all of this with no quarterback. For this part of the video, I want you to think of a really good wide receiver. Who came to mind? Did you go new, with the likes of the LSU duo of Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase, or with an all-time legend like Jerry Rice or Steve Largent? Thinking about what makes these players so good, a few things come to mind. Size, speed, good hands, footwork, agility, balance, and even intangibles like confidence all contribute to their success. But in order to produce the stats that were put up by such players, which is largely what makes them great in the first place, there is another key factor: their quarterback. Let's take a quick glance at the top list of receiving yard seasons in NFL history. One of the new additions to this list, in the number 2 spot, is none other than Cooper Kupp. Prior to breaking out as the Triple Crown winner and Offensive Player of the Year in 2021, Kupp was a solid receiver, posting his best year in his third season with 1,161 yards and 10 touchdowns. This was with Jared Goff as his quarterback, who came in as the 19th best quarterback that season in terms of EPA and CPOE. However, Kupp posted his insane 2021 season with Matthew Stafford at quarterback, who finished with the 6th highest EPA and CPOE and as the 4th best in adjusted EPA per play. While Kupp's performance and Stafford's success would have positively impacted each other, Stafford was no doubt a quarterback upgrade for Kupp, and a large reason why he was able to post arguably the best receiver season ever. Stafford is a gunslinger, and that is exactly what a receiver needs in order to be able to post those kinds of good stats. For Kupp, he was the 3rd most aggressive quarterback in the league in terms of average yards thrown past the sticks. Coincidentally enough, Stafford also quarterbacked Calvin Johnson's 2012 campaign, which rivals Kupp's season for the best ever. Looking back at the single-season receiving yard leaders, we see the likes of 1995 Jerry Rice, who played with Steve Young, Antonio Brown with Big Ben, Julio Jones with Matt Ryan, and the list goes on, and of course, there are notable exceptions. But let's get back on track with the focus of this video, and probably the biggest exception to this good quarterback trend, with Josh Gordon. In the 2013 season, Gordon played with a trio of quarterbacks, but mostly saw passes from the likes of Jason Campbell and Brandon Weeden. And to put it simply, these guys were bad. Like, really bad. Like, both bottom 4 in CPOE bad. Campbell and Weeden came in 29th and 35th respectively in EPA plus CPOE among 36 qualified quarterbacks from 2013, allowing the Browns to hold the dubious honor of the league's 6th worst EPA per play when the quarterback dropped back to pass. Yet, despite all the shortcomings of his signal caller, a 22-year-old, largely unproven Josh Gordon put together one of the best receiver seasons in recent NFL history. So, I know what you may be thinking. How good was Josh Gordon really? Well, we can look at first the basic counting stats to see where he finished amongst other wide receivers during the 2013 season. Gordon's final slash line was 87 receptions for 1,646 yards and 9 touchdowns. That landed him in the top 15 for each category, along with being first in total receiving yards, at a pace of 117.6 yards per game, which is good for 6th all time. Diving a bit deeper, we can see that Gordon was an elite downfield threat, as he ranked 2nd in yards per reception behind only Kenny Stills. And in terms of air EPA, which is the expected points added from air yards alone, Gordon came in 3rd in the NFL. Clearly, Gordon was incredible this season, and this was especially true compared to the severe lack of talent that surrounded him. We have already discussed the lack of quarterback talent on the Browns, but what about the rest of their offense? Well, their leading rushers were Willis McGahee and Chris Ogbenaya, who had only 377 and 240 rushing yards respectively, but the rushing attack was a modest 13th most efficient in the NFL. In terms of other receivers, the only other player on the Browns to eclipse 500 yards was tight end Jordan Cameron, who is not to be confused with Cameron Jordan, of course. The tight end out of USC finished with 917 yards, making 2013 by far the best year in his career. Behind Cameron was the wide receivers Greg Little and Devon Best with 465 and 362 yards respectively. What this tells us is that Gordon was a shining spot on an offense which had a pretty severe lack of talent all around, which also would have contributed to defenses focusing more on Gordon. So the question is, on such an offense, how was Gordon so good? Well, Gordon is what I like to call a playmaker. To illustrate the meaning of such a term, I created a statistic called the playmaking score, which consisted of two parts: how good a receiver was after the catch, and how much they were a downfield threat. Good examples of players who excel in both categories is Tyreek Hill and Jamar Chase, as they both can get behind a defense and make a big play through the air, while also having the ability to take a short pass 70 yards to the crib. So, the playmaking score I created takes into account both yards after catch EPA and average depth of target equally, combining how a receiver did in both categories compared to the league average. Listed here are the top receiver seasons in playmaking score since 2010. On this list are some guys who excel in one category more than the other, like Deshaun Jackson in average depth of target, Deebo Samuel in yards after catch, and then just a lot of guys who played with Patrick Mahomes. But of course, in the number 2 spot is our guy, Josh Gordon, who just so happened to be elite in both categories. Gordon was not only able to utilize his ability to put up crazy season-long stats, but he also managed to do something over a 2-game span that has never been done before. The first game of Flash Gordon's spectacular 2-game stretch took place on November 24th, 2013. The Pittsburgh Steelers rolled into Cleveland looking to pull ahead of their division rivals as both teams entered this Week 12 game with a record of 4 wins and 6 losses. From the beginning of the game, Gordon showed why he was one of the best in the league. Not only did he showcase his elite downfield and after the catch abilities that we have already discussed, Gordon also made some great catches on some not so great throws from both Whedon and Campbell. Speaking of those quarterbacks, both would attempt over 20 passes in this game, but would finish with less than -7 total EPA, and Whedon even had a -13.3 completion percentage over expected, or should I say under expected. However, like was the case over the rest of this 2013 season, that didn't stop Gordon from balling out. The Flash's final stat line for this game was 14 catches for 237 yards and 1 touchdown, making his mark on a game that the Browns would lose by 16 points. Luckily for the Browns, the next week would be a chance to get back on their feet against another bad team, the Jacksonville Jaguars, who went into Cleveland as 7.5-point underdogs and a 2-9 record. Plus, the Browns have Josh Gordon, who broke the franchise single-game receiving record against the Steelers and picked up right where he left off.
First and 10, looking deep, aims for Gordon with the catch. He got it.
Whedon was the signal caller for the Browns this week, and he quickly locked onto Gordon as his favorite target.
For Whedon. Outside for Gordon.
Before the first half was over, Flash Gordon had already eclipsed the 100-yard mark for the third straight week, with 6 catches for 125 yards and a touchdown.
Whedon wasn't expecting that pass, but it goes for Gordon, who's got the ball, and a Cleveland Brown touchdown.
However, potential tragedy would strike for the Browns in the third quarter. Whedon attempted to hit Gordon streaking down the sideline, but Jaguar safety Winston Guy crushed Gordon, knocking off his helmet and forcing him into concussion protocol. But Josh Gordon wasn't going down that easily. He would re-enter the game late into the third quarter in an extremely tight game. Eventually, the Jaguars would tack on a field goal with 4 minutes to go, and that gave them a 4-point lead. The Browns got the ball back and needed to score here, but their best offensive player was banged up. However, given his immense skill and importance, it would be hard to put the ball in the hands of anybody besides Josh Gordon. Their quarterback, Brandon Whedon, turned the ball over 3 times in the first half. But luckily for the Browns, Josh Gordon was the best receiver ever who didn't need a quarterback. With that, Josh Gordon had not only smashed the Browns' single-game receiving record he set just last week, he became the first player in NFL history to have back-to-back 200-yard receiving games, a record that has still yet to be matched today. Despite the Browns allowing the Jaguars to come back and win the game, their stud Josh Gordon ended the day with 10 catches for 261 yards and 2 touchdowns. One of the things I've continually mentioned in this video is Josh Gordon's per-game stats, and the fact that he only played 14 games in 2013. The 2 games he missed at the beginning of the season were not due to injury, but rather were a suspension for violating the league's substance abuse policy. Off-the-field issues would continue to plague Gordon's career, as an arrest for a DWI before the 2014 season got him suspended for the entire season, though it would later be shortened to just 10 games. As such, Gordon played the Browns' final 5 games in 2014, averaging a mediocre 60 yards. This was really only the beginning of Gordon's issues, though, as it wouldn't be until Week 12 of the 2017 NFL season that he would see the field again, due to more violations of the league's substance abuse policy, entering rehab, and failing reinstatement appeals. From 2014 through 2021, Gordon would only start 36 games, with his best stint coming in 2018 with the Patriots, where he posted 2 100-yard games over the course of 10 weeks, but remained far from his peak 2013 form. As of this recording, Gordon is currently a member of the Kansas City Chiefs, and is fighting for a spot on their 53-man roster for 2022. Personally, I wish Gordon the best of luck in making the roster, as I one day hope to see him dominate the gridiron like he did in 2013. As it currently stands, many consider Gordon to be one of the biggest what-if stories in the NFL. His 2013 season, which I covered in this video, happened when Gordon was just 22, the same age that Jamar Chase is, Justin Jefferson was last season, and Odell Beckham Jr. was when he posted 1,300 yards and made the catch as a rookie. If Gordon was able to play out his entire career from 2013 onwards, he would likely have been remembered among the greatest receivers of this generation. But for now, he will remain known as the receiver who had no quarterback.